And welcome back to this week's Capitol Report. With us this morning is Pat McGuigan from CapitolBeatOK.com. Hey, the elections are over. What's the next big thing for us in the political world, Pat?
You know, there's still some things worth reflecting on from the election, and it's pretty clear what the next big things are. The fiscal cliff. We'll talk about that in a second. But I was really struck after working so hard for 2 days when I actually got to see the data about turnout. There's 14 million people fewer voted in this election than in 2008. That was a little startling given some of the long lines we saw.
Why do you think that is? Why such a lower turnout?
You know, I don't know. I think a couple things. I think the intensity of the Obama voters might have weakened. They were still for him, but a certain percentage just, didn't care quite as much. And then on the flip side, I think there might have been some lingering unease with the ardency of his conservatism. But I don't know I'll have to do a lot more study before I can come up with a good opinion on that. I will say this, immediately the day after the election, we have a 313-point drop in the Dow after there'd been a rally on election day when people thought maybe that Romney was going to win. Here's the bottom line. If Romney had received as many raw votes as John McCain did, and Obama had received as many as he did in this election, the popular vote would have been a virtual tie.
Let me ask you this, speaking of President Obama, now that the election is over, on the federal level, what do you see happening with the health care reform? Anything changing with that?
Well, it ties in. Let me mention the fiscal cliff, because you've got positioning going on where the Democrats are moving hard to blame Republicans for the coming of the fiscal cliff. That's interesting because the only substantive detailed budget that's been offered in the last few years is by the House Republicans. You can agree or disagree with that, but the budget was put on the table. There hasn't been a budget from the Senate Democrats in several years, and the president has not laid out a detailed spending plan. So that's going to be interesting to see if they can get away with that messaging. What they need to do is put out a detailed budget plan and have the two sides argue about it. On the fiscal cliff, that goes right in to a discussion, any serious discussion of the health care issue. You're going to have a flood of new rules. Now, if the president had lost, you would have had a whole bunch of rules come out real fast. As it is now, he was reelected, so you'll have a methodical laying out of new rules for implementation of the health care law. Exchanges, the deadline is the 16th, just days away. Oklahoma's going to have to decide if they're going to participate in the exchange or, as a handful of states have done, stay out of it. The HHS mandate and its implementation, which put a lot of cross pressures on particularly Catholic voters, the requirement for health insurance plans to cover abortion-causing drugs, dictates on what's going to be covered in private health insurance plans, higher premiums. All of this will come out in the coming weeks and months, and a year from now we're going to have full-fledged, implementation of the law. Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, the president's supporters are saying ardently that has to be off the table. Can't touch those. Well, the president has indicated no cuts to college student aid, no cuts to Planned Parenthood, and no cuts that affect ACA, the Affordable Care Act, or as some people call it, Obamacare. Well, you get all of that off the table, what's left? What's left is tax increases and defense spending cuts. And that's not going to be an easy sell. Now, Boehner and the president both have made some noises about trying to work together, so we'll see how that plays out.
Let me ask you this, back here at home, do you see both parties working together with the upcoming session? Are we going to see that same kind of attitude?
Yeah, we don't have divided government here like we do in Washington. And Scott Inman in the House and Sean Burridge in the Senate, the two Democratic leaders, certainly have a lot of ability to make themselves consequential, even though their numbers are really small. Senate, 36-12 now for Republicans, a net over the cycle of 4-seat gain. The Republicans are up to 72, the all-time record. The previous high was 70, and then that dropped down a little bit during the last 2 years, but it's back up to 72 to 29 advantage. So, yes, they'll be working together, but they're going to be working together on a sheet of paper written by the Republicans.
Good point. Let's just hope that they work together here locally and in Washington. Pat, thanks again for joining us
Thanks. Always
this week.
enjoy it.
For the Capitol Report, you can catch all of Pat's work on CapitolBeatOK.com. We'll be back after this.